Welcome to the Bible Forum, you smart people, you. I want to talk to you about being smart. Criminals are getting busy. They're becoming very creative. There's an onslaught of new frauds preying on our fears and anxieties about the coronavirus pandemic. Desperate people are finding their unemployment checks and stimulus payments stolen. They're also being bombarded with offers for fake cures, fake work-at-home offers, messages asking for personal financial information. TransUnion, a credit bureau, runs a weekly survey that shows 29% of consumers say they've been targets of digital fraud related to COVID-19. In what is probably the most widespread scam, criminals are filing fake unemployment claims on behalf of real people, people who haven't lost their jobs. They're hitting one state after another with this scam. A Nigerian crime ring called Scattered Canary may be responsible for a lot of this fraud, which is made more attractive by the extra $600 a week in unemployment benefits that Congress enacted. The FTC says consumers have reported about $50 million in losses to the agency. Paul Stevens of the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse tells Axios.com some of the really pernicious stuff that we're seeing were about people ordering PPE type materials, face masks, hand sanitizers, stuff that never arrives. Official-looking notices claiming to be from the government might say you've been overpaid in stimulus or unemployment benefits and need to return the money immediately. They say you have to do it right now or you will be arrested. And oh, by the way, put it on an Apple gift card. Fraudsters dangle lures like, check your $1,200 stimulus pay status. Then there were the W-2 scams in which a hacker spoofs the email address of a CEO and asks HR department for a list of employees' tax information. Norton's LifeLock tells Axios, while the elderly are frequent victims, they're joined by young people online, idle, jittery, including college students, nervous about their academic future and tuition status. They pretend they're from the school's financial department, and they begin giving you choices. Common sense advice to protect yourself: be suspicious of any unsolicited call or text. Talk to someone before taking action. Contact the company through a means whereby you would be assured it was the company and see if they're doing that. These are wise words that all of your grandparents knew. They didn't have to be told. So why don't we? Well, your grandparents, probably your great-grandparents, almost certainly knew. Don't believe anything that sounds crazy or insist you do this or that unless you know the person or the company saying it. And even then, check it out. Rule of thumb, basic logic. Why is this generation so gullible? Well, the easy answer, the quick answer, is the internet. They are bombarded with all sorts of ideas and instructions coming from what appeared to most of people as legitimate. Only most people don't know what legitimate looks like. Why don't they? Well, because they're not worldly wise. And I'm talking about worldly wisdom in a good sense. Today we are driven by the internet, by our friends, not common sense, not wise counsel. And when I say friends, I'm talking about the friends online, People you've never met, you don't know. We wouldn't know where to go in order to get wise counsel today. And the reason is primarily the fragmentation of the family. But there's also the information overload that comes at us from largely anonymous sources. And then there's our own ignorance and gullibility. A growing number of Americans are finding it more difficult to separate truth from fiction. And that's largely due to the immense information overload that we're experiencing. But it's also from the increasingly clever crooks who are able to craft websites or sound bites that look real. How do you defend yourself? Well, you consider everything on the internet to be either false or misleading, unless you know otherwise. Yeah, but how would I know otherwise? You would check it out. You would talk to people. You would Google the company or the spiel. It's called due diligence, and it's something your forebears knew and lived by. Large companies have been fooled. Lawyers and business people have been fooled. Why? How? Same way. Their greed or their gullibility or their just carelessness. Reliable companies don't play games. You order something from them, they acknowledge the order, they ship it almost immediately. You change your mind or you receive it to learn that that's not what you thought, they'll take it back. No questions asked. When that doesn't happen, it's either a highly specialized product or one you knew up front that if you did your due diligence, you could not return it. But the exceptions here are products offered by companies you've never heard of. Products that seemed too good to be true. And your grandparents knew that if it sounded too good to be true, it probably was. If you can't get it from Amazon or some other well-known company, look around, talk to people, search the name or the product. Somewhere in the 1990s, all of this kind of thinking changed in America. Integrity, honesty, quality began to be compromised. And the internet was largely the culprit. Now a plethora of anonymous people and groups telling us all sorts of things in order to get our business. Today the internet is a veritable cesspool of false information and money traps. The only solution is to deal with well-known, proven companies and websites. What is it that happened in our culture that changed all of this and made it so much more dangerous? What happened was the destruction of the family structure. The family is the backbone of society, and it's been traded for anonymity and for quick solutions. Young people born and raised in the 1970s and 80s did not have the same structure, did not have the same training that other generations have always had. Why? Because of the breakdown of the family. How? Because the world convinced mothers, women in general, but mothers, they could have it all. They could have a home, they could have a family, they could have children, and they could have a full-time job. It was a bold lie, but it fed our greed. And it seemed possible for a while. I remember in the 70s, 80s, and 90s talking to women who wept at the idea that they left their children in the care of strangers to go to work. And they did it in part because their husbands wanted them to do it. Why should you stay home? You got a college education. You had a job. You need to be doing. No, we just wanted more money. We got to the place where we really believed that if mom and dad were not working, we couldn't make it. That's never been true. It's not true now. So you can't make it the way your parents are making it, or other people you know, but you can make it. In those days, children were being raised by babysitters, caretakers, preschools, and the rest of it. 30, 40 hours a week in the care of someone other than their parents. Values, standards, morality that used to be transmitted by the family are gone. And now children are being imprinted, those young minds and those hearts imprinted by strangers. The culture fragmented. But we were living a much better life, a higher standard of life than we would have if mom had stayed home and taken care of business. Now multiply that by 3 generations, each generation seeing it more logically than the one before, each generation being more careless than the one before. Young people who think life will hand them what they need. Young people with no real objective standards of right and wrong. Young adults who know only the patterns they've experienced as children. Patterns, by the way, that don't work, but patterns that seem to work, meaning they allow me to be and to do as I want without the limitations that children always bring to a family. When you look at the future today, you don't see hope. You don't see stability. You don't see safety. You see the opposite of all of these, along with a lot of fear. And that was not true in the 1950s. Yeah, I was there. I was a teenager in the 1950s. I saw it. I was alert to what was going on. But then we didn't have cell phones to bring all our friends, family, worldly characters we don't even know into our lives every minute of every day to tell us all sorts of things that we believe. Young people today never turn off their phones. Did you know that? My phone gets turned off when I walked in the house. Unless I know there's something needs to happen. Their phones are on all night, close to hand, just in case, under the pillow, wherever. What's that do to their sleep cycles? Not to mention the quality of sleep. A nervous system always at the ready. Questionable information always being fed into our minds and into our hearts. The sheer volume of information being overwhelming. But we're used to it, they say. You see, the person who never turns their phone on until or unless they need it almost doesn't exist anymore. And if that person does exist, they're probably very old, like me. Today we seem to need information, and we need it now. How can we function without it? How do I function if I don't know what's going on in the world and my neighbors around the world and the newest products, the newest crazes? I gotta have this information. The amount of false information being available to children today is overwhelming. I would say most parents today, young parents today, don't even understand what's false anymore. True information is not as stimulating, not as captivating, nor as satisfying as is false information. And other people's problems flooding our minds, flooding our hearts all day long. World problems that's on our minds. I'm telling you, in the 50s, we had people to take care of world problems. Young people didn't think about that stuff. And not everybody can handle it. I'd say, in fact, most people can't. Handling it, the ability to hear, to read, to know some really bad stuff and not have it impact or influence our lives. The ability to separate what's important from what's interesting or scary. The ability to know what's true, what's right, as opposed to things that are false and wrong. Most of what you hear on the news, on television today, is false and wrong. Almost right, but a little bit of false. How much false does a statement have to have before it's false? A little bit. The ability to isolate and to process important information from everything else. Where did all that go? We used to have that. Young people used to have that. It left when we abandoned our foundational structures. The home, the family, the church, the community. Structures that are designed to keep us balanced, centered, real, and safe. When I was a little kid, 8, 10, 12 years of age, I could go out and play in the summertime after breakfast and not come home till supper. And nobody asked, where were you? What did you do? I was irresponsible. No. The neighborhood was my parents. There wasn't anything I did that my parents didn't find out about. It's different today. Those structures were there designed to keep us balanced, to keep us centered, to keep us real. Our society will continue to fragment. Our society will continue to devolve as long as we neglect these bedrock structures. You believe that? Most people do not believe that. Most people will not believe that. And therein lies the problem.